Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. Dr. Shred here. Today we're going to start talking about my medical stuff topics. We're going to talk about diabetes today. We're going to talk about what it does to you, the problems of having diabetes, and what you can do to control your condition. So let's get into it. Okay, so what is diabetes? Diabetes is a condition where your body doesn't regulate glucose properly and your glucose levels build up in your blood. It affects about 10% of people worldwide, so it's a very prevalent and very common condition. When someone gets diabetes, their glucose level goes up, and for some reason that causes lots of bad things to your body that we'll talk about. So there's two different forms of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Let's talk about type 1 first. Type 1 generally affects younger people. It does have a genetic risk. If it runs in your family, you do have a high risk of getting it. And it's generally not affected by your lifestyle. So it's not really associated with being overweight or eating a bunch of carbohydrates. So what causes type 1 diabetes? Type 1 diabetes is felt to be an autoimmune disease where your body makes antibodies that attack your pancreas. They attack the beta cells which produce insulin. So patients with type 1 diabetes don't have enough insulin. They can't get glucose into their cells to utilize for energy consumption. So typically type 1 diabetics, when they get to extreme conditions, start using fat as a form of energy for their cells. That's what leads to the initial complication of diabetes, diabetic ketoacidosis. Now let's talk about type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes generally affects older individuals. There is some genetic risk as well, but there are large lifestyle environmental factors that play a role. For example, eating too many carbs can be a concern, being overweight is a big issue, and being inactive can also increase your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. What happens in type 2 diabetes? In type 2 diabetes, your pancreas makes enough insulin. Sometimes it makes higher levels of insulin, but your cells are resistant to the insulin. So we call it an insulin-resistant type disease. And so your cells aren't able to take in glucose properly. They take in some glucose, but not enough. They don't generally have to resort to burning fats, and so you don't really develop the ketoacidosis of type 1 diabetics. But the biggest problem in type 2 diabetes is your glucose level gets very high. Typically diabetics that develop type 2 diabetics enter the hospital with glucose levels of 600 to almost 1500. And that high sugar causes symptoms where you urinate a lot, we call it polyuria. That makes you excessively thirsty, polydipsia, you drink a lot, and you get profoundly dehydrated, and sometimes that can cause you to go into a coma. Unlike type 1 diabetes, where the acute problems occur pretty quickly, in type 2 diabetes, if it's undiagnosed, it can linger for a while. And so you may be type 2 diabetic and not know about it, and it would take months before you end up in that severe state where you end up getting hospitalized. Now let's talk about the real problem with diabetes, the long-term consequences. And really type 1 and type 2 diabetics have the same type of long-term consequences. And the consequences that are long-term occur because of having high sugars in your blood. For some reason, high glucose in your blood is not tolerated, and it causes damage to lots of different organs. And uncontrolled type 1 or type 2 diabetes, in my opinion, is one of the worst diseases to have because it affects your body globally and causes tons of severe diseases as you get older. And that's why it's so important, if you're diabetic, to keep your sugars tightly controlled. It may not make you feel well or any better because you don't feel bad when your sugar is 150 or 200. But when you think of the long-term consequences of poorly controlled diabetes, you really want to keep your glucose tightly controlled to prevent long-term complications. Long-term effects of diabetes in general include the following. First, it increases the development of cholesterol buildup in your arteries. And that leads to heart attacks, strokes. It can cause blockage in your legs where you don't get enough blood flow to your leg. And sometimes you see people getting amputations because of diabetes, and that's the reason. So blockage in the arteries is a big and probably one of the biggest problems of long-term uncontrolled diabetes. It can also have bad effects on your kidneys. Patients with diabetes tend to have kidney failure, and eventually they end up getting on dialysis over time. Diabetes can affect your retina. It can cause new blood vessels to form in the back of your eye that can rupture and cause bleeding, and that can lead to blindness. And diabetes can also affect the nerves of your body, causing neuropathy, where you feel numbness and burning and tingling in your fingers and toes initially, and it can progress itself up, further up your body. It can eventually lead to loss of balance and other neurologic complications. Because type 1 diabetics don't have enough insulin, the only treatment that works for them is supplying insulin. And it's usually going to be 2 to 4 shots a day, or sometimes a continuous insulin pump. We're basically replacing the insulin that their pancreas can't make, trying to get their sugar levels back to normal. The treatment for type 2 diabetes is typically pills, and they tend to work pretty well. We now have new shots that we can give, but they're not insulin shots. They're shots you take once a week that can also help type 2 diabetics. Eventually, as type 2 diabetics get older, sometimes the insulin levels do drop over time, and they do require insulin as treatment as well. So if you were to develop diabetes, in addition to the medications that your doctor is prescribing, what else can you do to help control your condition? Diet is such an important part of controlling diabetes. Patients who are diabetic should really be on a very low carbohydrate diet. They should also be on a low fat diet like everybody else should, which means they should be on a high protein diet as well. And if you look at my Lose Your Rind Selecting Food video, it shows you how to pick high protein foods that will naturally be low in carbohydrates and low in fat, that are great for diabetics as well. As far as specific foods, I always tell my diabetics avoid 5 things, the 5 white things, and that would include sugar, bread, pasta, potatoes, and rice. And when we're talking about bread, sometimes people think brown bread or whole wheat bread is okay. It is better than white bread, but it's still not good for you. It's still full of carbs, and you should really try to avoid all breaded products if possible. Likewise, potatoes. Some people think sweet potatoes are okay to eat, but they're not. They're also full of carbs. Again, better than white potatoes, but both are bad. You should try to minimize both if you can. And I also talked about 3 vegetables that you should avoid, and that would be potatoes, which you mentioned, corn, which people don't really realize. Corn has lots of carbohydrates in it, and beans. Beans do have some protein, but they're about 80% carbohydrates. So those are 3 vegetables that you should try to avoid. Most other vegetables are your best friend when you're diabetic. Here are a few examples of things you may want to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The typical American breakfast is a no-no for diabetics. Pancakes, toast, cream of wheat, cold cereal, oatmeal, and grits are all full of carbohydrates. And even though you think oatmeal and Cheerios may be good for you, they are not good for diabetics. A better diabetic diet would be something like egg whites, some lean turkey bacon, a cup of yogurt, and a piece of fruit. That would be a very low carb, high protein, low fat diet that you should eat. So think about what you're eating for breakfast and rethink it, because I think a lot of you are eating the wrong things. For lunch, many people have a sandwich. It's easy and it's convenient, it's easy to package and take to work, but it has the bread on it, which you should avoid. Instead, do a wrap, perhaps with a low carb wrap, or you can have a salad with chicken on it, or a salad with cut lunch meat on it. That'd be a lot better as far as getting rid of carbohydrates. For dinner, instead of having spaghetti sauce with pasta, have spaghetti sauce with zucchini noodles. Substitute the zucchini for your pasta and you got a great low carb diabetic meal. Instead of having potatoes, have carrots and squash instead if you're making stew or something that requires potatoes. Instead of having rice, have cauliflower rice. Cauliflower rice is pure cauliflower, it's pure vegetables, very low in carb, much better choice for diabetics. So there are smart ways you can adjust your diet to still eat things that taste good, still eat things you're familiar with, but be on a very low carb diet that'll help your diabetes, help control your glucose, and help you avoid those long-term consequences that we discussed. For more specific ideas of what you should eat, look at my Lose Your Rind Selecting Foods video. It's got a long list of items you can eat that are high in protein and low in fat, and they're naturally low in carbohydrates as well, and they work great for diabetics. To diet, weight loss and exercise are critically important for controlling your diabetes. People who are overweight tend to have higher insulin resistance. Something about the fat in your body causes your insulin not to work properly. And when patients lose weight, dramatic weight loss, they can convert themselves from type 2 diabetics to pre-diabetic or even back to normal glucose metabolism. So I've seen a lot of patients that I've encouraged to lose weight just get rid of their diabetes completely. So I would encourage you to keep your weight controlled, and if you're overweight, make dramatic efforts to lose weight. And if you look at my Lose Your Rind series, it'll help you with that as well. And finally, exercise is very important. Exercise has magical properties in the body. We don't understand the physiology behind all of it, but somehow exercise helps control your glucose as well. So low carb diet, critically important, weight loss, super important, and exercise, super important. And if you look at my other videos, they may help you with those facets as well. Diabetes in a nutshell. We talked about the importance of keeping your glucose tightly controlled. We talked about things you can do with your diet, exercise, and weight loss to help control your condition so you stay healthy and you avoid the long-term consequences of diabetes. Thanks for watching.
Hey Bindi, what you doing?
Oh, I'm just walking on the treadmill, trying to eat healthy and watching my weight because I don't want to get diabetes.
Well, I just ate cake and ice cream and I'm gonna take a nap. See ya.
Ooh, if Dr. Shred finds out, he's gonna be so mad. I can't wait to tell him. Oh, Daddy!